Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Channavalabha Girivaradari Jaya Gopi Channavalabha Girivaradari Jashodanandana Vrajajanaranjana Jashodanandana Vrajajanaranjana Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Shri Radha Molidar Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nitai Gaura Premanandi Hari Haribo Hare Krishna Hare Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Mukam Karoti Vachalam Bhongam Langayate Girim Yat Kripatamaham Vande Shri Guru Dinatarinam. Hare Krishna, thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to be here with you. It's very beautiful, wonderful, and inspiring how many devotees regularly are giving oral reception to Srimad Bhagavatam. The practice itself is very purifying. There's something beautiful and mystical that takes place when we come together and offer ourselves up to spiritual sound vibration and to hear. And so for both the speaker and for the listeners, we work so hard in our devotional lives, right? Some of you right now I can see are doing service as the class is going on. Some of you are at work right now. Some of you are at home. Some of you are taking care of your kids. Some of you are on your way somewhere. Some of you are around the world. Some of you are listening to the recording right now in Australia or in Europe or in wherever it may be. And we're all trying really, really hard to make spiritual advancement. We're trying to figure out how to overcome our anartas, how to serve more sincerely, how to invoke Krishna's grace and the grace of the devotees, and how to extinguish this extraordinarily large fire of material anguish in the heart. This analogy is used quite often. We discussed last week in the class that I gave that one of the first qualities of pure bhakti, is listed by Rupa Goswami in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, is Klesh Agni, that it extinguishes the miseries, the kleshas of material life. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we know, famously mentioned Cheto Dharpana Marjanam Bhava Maha Davagni Nirvapanam. Bhava Maha, the great fire. Bhava Maha Davagni Nirvapanam. Davagni, the fire of material existence, it extinguishes and wipes out. And later in that same prayer of Shikshastakam, he says, Shreya Kairava Chandrika Vitaranam. Shreya, the Shreya Kairava, the lotus of good fortune. Shreya Kairava Chandrika Vitaranam. It spreads like the moon rays, and the moon rays are meant to be cooling. They're like like putting a burn in a pot of yogurt. It's cooling. And so the moonbeams of Krishna's, the lotus light, the lotus of good fortune spreads like the rays of the moon to extinguish that burning fire in all of us. So we're all experiencing some level of a burning fire in our heart, whether it's our anger that flares up. Some of us may be struggling with, like, how do I get rid of this anger? Or maybe it might be our jealousy or our need to compare. Like, why am I always comparing? And why am I so fixated on what that person has? Or maybe it's just our insecurities of, like, why do I feel like I'm not enough, and I feel like I'm behind and I'm less than, I'm trying to prove myself. Or maybe it just might be not we're trying to get rid of something negative, but we just want something positive. I just want more love for Krishna. I just want more connection and feeling of purpose and meaning. And we all have spiritual aspirations in our life. And we're dependent on Krishna's grace to get those things. We're dependent on the grace of Krishna and the devotees. And so at a certain point we realize, you know what, like, there's just no way I can do this on my own. There's no amount of, like, going to the gym that's going to, like, make my spiritual muscles get so big that I'm doing it on my own. But at a certain point, it's just Krishna being pleased with my activities, devotees being pleased, and that grace opening up in the heart. And so we do that by coming together and listening to Srimad Bhagavatam, even if we don't understand everything we're reading or hearing or sharing, even as a speaker. We're not only trying to extract some nugget of wisdom. We're not only trying to extract some practical takeaway that I can apply into my life, that I can, some argument that I can use against somebody, or some practical tip that's going to help me in some aspect of my life. That is there, and surely Srimad Bhagavatam gives that. But more than anything, I'm just trying to actually crack open my heart and allow Krishna to come in. And we do that by coming together and listening to Srimad Bhagavatam, and something mystical takes place. So thank you for doing that service. Your activities are not unnoticed by our dear Sri Krishna. And coming to Srimad Bhagavatam class is a beautiful thing. Andrea put in the chat, Hare Krishna, good morning, happy Valentine's Day, or Day of Love and Friendship. Hare Krishna. I guess, is Valentine's Day a global thing? Are people all over the world listening to recordings? Are you guys also celebrating Valentine's Day? Hare Krishna to all of the lovers out there, and to all the lonely too. Sometimes Valentine's Day is a lonely day. And we love you also, and Krishna is always with you. Jeff said that when we work out at the spiritual gym, remember that you need a spotter. Yes, Hare Krishna. Okay, so we are going to go ahead and we'll dive into, as our dear friend Raghunath would say, the honey pot of nectar of Srimad Bhagavatam. I think that's a sweet way to put it. We're going to go ahead and look at the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. What is it? Chapter 17, verses 9 through 12. I get that right, Ananda Bihari?
Yes.
Okay, so let's go ahead and share my screen. Jeff said, all glories to some of the devotees, spotters. All glories to the assembled spotters. Okay, so this is chapter 17 of the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled The History of Kaliya. The first line here of the summary says, this chapter describes how Kaliya left the island of the snakes and how the sleeping residents of Vrindavan were saved from a forest fire. We have this saying that every saint has a past and every sinner has a future. You know, the idea of people's stories are really important. And the Bhagavatam itself is a collection of stories. The collection of great souls and their pasts. And not all great souls in the Bhagavatam, even some of the greatest souls in Srimad Bhagavatam come from troubled backgrounds. And their spiritual journeys don't even always begin with the purest of pursuits. So, does anybody have an example of someone in Srimad Bhagavatam, a pure soul, a devotee that we revere for their sincerity, their humility, their devotion, their surrender, But it didn't necessarily start that way. Their story doesn't begin with them as a pure saintly devotee, just kind of, making garlands in the temple room, or, serving prasad at Thursday night kirtan. Jeff said Dhruva Maharaj in the chat. Dhruva Maharaj is a great example. Dhruva Maharaj began, he was feeling that burning forest fire. He was feeling that raging fire of jealousy, of insecurity, of envy, of pain, of neglect, of embarrassment. And he set out to prove something. He set out to prove something, to prove his worth, to prove to other people, to show them up. That was his past. And in the process, he realized actually that he was searching for broken pieces of glass amidst the diamonds of Krishna's pure devotional service. And so we hear the story of Dhruva Maharaj, and we're meant to find ourselves in that story and realize that actually, like, in my greatest ecstasies and heights of spiritual life, I can relate to the characters of Srimad Bhagavatam, and in my lowest moments, I can also relate to those same characters who experience low points in their life also. Bali Maharaj. Bali Maharaj was a great king of the demons. He was born in a demon family. Prahlad Maharaj also born in a demon family, so it doesn't necessarily matter where you come from. It matters, again, quoting Raghunath a lot today, it doesn't matter what you got, it matters what you do with what you got. The idea of there's no disqualification. And so much of the Bhagavatam, and especially in Chaitanya Charitamrita, when you read the stories of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his interactions, so much of it is about breaking stereotypes of somebody's background, disqualifying them from pure devotional service. Haridas Thakur, Rupa and Sanatana Goswami, who were considered outcasts because of their governmental positions and crossing lines between Muslim and Hindu camps at the time, which was very, very, very taboo. And so we learn about the idea of breaking boundaries, and so much in Srimad Bhagavatam, and you read in the Nectar of Devotion, the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu by Rupa Goswami, about bhakti not being dependent on any material factor. So that's quite revolutionary, and we hear that. So Bali Maharaj and the family of asuras, of ungodly people, of aspiritual individuals, didn't necessarily recognize Vamana Maharaj when he saw him, had some pretentiousness, and had to be bound by the Lord. And ultimately, though, he is now, you have the 9 processes of devotional service, as described by his grandfather. Is Prahlad Maharaj the grandfather? Krishna Daya Prabhu, you are one of our resident scholars. Is Prahlad Maharaj the grandfather of Bali Maharaj? You can maybe clarify the relationship. His own kin, his own ancestor, Prahlad Maharaj, mentioned Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmanivedanam, those processes of devotional service: hearing, chanting, remembering, serving the lotus feet, offering prayers, worshiping the Lord, being a friend, serving, and then surrendering one's full life and soul. Bali Maharaj is the example of Atmanivedana, offering one's full self. He didn't start that way. He did not start that way. Was somebody going to unmute? Krishnadai, were you going to clarify the relationship? No, I don't know. Okay. Jagan Madai, Hare Krishna, Jagan Madai, of course. I mean, they're like the biggest example, the most extreme of examples. There's a devotee I know, his name is Jagai Nitai Das. And it's like, why would you be called? And we call him, people just call him Jagai. Because he received the mercy of Nityananda, and even from the most troubling and terrible of backgrounds, came to a level of realization, and then were ultimately revered. Krishnadaya, Prahlad Maharaj's grandfather, Bali Maharaj. Yeah, so these are examples. Gajendra was one proud dude walking through the jungle, thinking that he was top of the line. And it wasn't until his darkest moment of struggle that he reached out. And we think of Gajendra as, one of my favorite songs, especially from Jahnavi and Willow Smith's Rise EP is Gajendra. They tell the story of surrender. You know, let go. Come and claim me as your own. From now on, I depend on you alone. This idea of just like fully surrendering. And we see there's a picture in the Bhagavatam, 8th canto, a painting, beautiful painting of Gajendra just throwing up the lotus flower. And so, so every saint has a past, and every sinner has a future. Who's a sinner that had a future in Srimad Bhagavatam? There's one really classic example that I'm thinking of, but I'm sure there are multiple. Anybody know from the 6th canto? Ajamil. Ajamil lived a very degraded life. He chanted the name of Narayan, and by grace came to a higher realization of understanding of who he is and what his purpose is and what he'd done, and went on to achieve perfection. Kalia! Bhakti Hugo. Hare Krishna, Kalia here. So all of this just to say, and we've gone on, we haven't even gotten to the verses yet, but all of this just to say is that the Bhagavatam takes great pains, not pains in a negative sense, but takes at great length to share with us the stories, of the characters of Bhagavatam. We learn through stories. We learn by hearing about other people. And when we learn about great souls, don't just think like, because sometimes we read Bhagavatam or read it, it's just like, I don't belong here. Like, these are all just like magnanimous souls just doing incredible, amazing things. And it's just like so far beyond me, and I'm so fallen and so, but whatever it might be. And I just realize they all have their stories of struggle. Arjuna's like a mess in the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita. He's just like a total mess. And Krishna himself is just like, he's like, dude, you're embarrassing yourself. Like, this is really, really pathetic. Like, pull it together, man. You know, it's like, he's a total puddle of tears, literally. And so why are all these stories? These stories are meant to help us connect with our own story. And one of the most powerful things we can do in spiritual life is learn the art of connecting to and owning our own story. Owning our own story in spiritual life and connecting that. So the history of Kaliya, all of that as a backdrop to this chapter, is that we don't just tell the lesson of Kaliya. We don't just the chastisement of Kaliya and the pastime of Krishna dancing on his head. We get into the history of Kaliya and his story of how he came to be and how he lived in the river of the Jamuna River, and his backstory and experience with Garuda. So all these verses are here. I'm assuming we've already read verses 1 through 8. So we have 9, 10, 11, and 12. So a few more minutes here. I can start to read our verses. Okay. Hare Krishna. Thank you for Bhakti Hugo's referencing the phrase from Jai Jagan Prabhu, owning your own journey. Yes, it's a very, very beautiful concept. It's a very, very beautiful concept. And I think one of the hardest things we do is, one of the biggest growth points along our journey is when we start to shift away from shame and guilt and embarrassment and move towards grace and acceptance and surrender. Where I recognize that we all have our embarrassing stories. Dhruva Maharaj, even after Dhruva Maharaj attained such perfection, you get the story of when one of his I think it was his brother that was killed, and the Yakshas, he went on this massive revenge campaign where he was just like taking out full rage on all the Yakshas, and afterwards he was just like, whew, I'm sorry, I don't know what got into me. Even then, like, he had his embarrassing moments. Arjuna had his embarrassing moments. Gajendra had like his humbling coming to Jesus moment, coming to Krishna moment, coming to Vishnu moment. And so we turn our guilt and our shame and our embarrassment into acceptance and humility and surrender. And we open up this massive access point to grace and advancement. Okay. Titraikada jalacharam garuda bhaksham ipsitam nivarita shaubharina prasahya kshudito haret. Kshudi, hunger. Prabhupada has a disciple who's named Shudidas. He's in Laguna Beach. Translation: in that very lake, Garuda had once desired to eat a fish. Don't so many of our troubles start with a desire? Hare Krishna. Careful about what you desire. So much of spiritual life is about honing and refining our desires, because our desires will degrade us or lift us up. So Garuda desired to eat a fish. Fish being, after all, his normal food. Prabhupada's disciples wanted to make sure that they clarified that birds are allowed to eat fish, but humans not recommended. Although forbidden by the sage Shobhari, who was meditating there within the water, Garuda took courage and, feeling hungry, seized the fish. So there was this scenario where he was apparently forbidden by some sage to eat fish in that water. The fish was off meditating. Garuda took his opportunity and he went for it. Purport. Shukadev Goswami is now explaining why Garuda could not approach the lake in the river Yamuna. Why couldn't he approach the lake in the river Yamuna? Anyone?
Because Garuda couldn't go to the Yamuna, he was forbidden to go there. He would immediately die.
He would immediately die. He's forbidden by the sage. Right there in the
Yeah.
verse. Forbidden by the sage Shobhari. Thank you. That sounded like Isabel, if that's you.
Yes,
Thank you.
it's Isabel.
Thank you, Isabel. It is the nature of birds to eat fish, and thus, by the arrangement of the Lord, the bird Garuda does not commit any offense by nourishing himself with fish. They're really taking an opportunity to mention to us that it's okay for birds to eat fish. Like devotees are like, oh my God, Garuda's a great devotee. How is he eating fish? Like, well, birds are allowed to eat fish. As if that wasn't, we needed some clarification. On the other hand, Sabari Muni's forbidding a much greater personality to eat his normal food did not constitute an offense. Okay, so on the other hand, Sabari Muni's forbidding a much greater personality to eat his normal food did not constitute an offense. Okay, so Sabari seems to be justified in making this forbidding. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Sobhari committed 2 offenses. Okay. First, he dared to give an order to a supremely exalted soul like Garuda, and second, he obstructed Garuda from satisfying desire. So apparently, it wasn't okay, according to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. It wasn't okay for Sobhari to make this forbidding. Very interesting point here that I want to bring up and make, but I'm going to read the next couple verses and see what comes up, and see if maybe it's related before I speak. But there's something very interesting about the idea of Shobhari, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, Shobhari Muni, forbidding Garuda to do something, and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, our Acharya, mentioning that it wasn't his place to give that order to Garuda, and that obstructing Garuda from satisfying his desire, because this happens so much. Like we have verses, right? Trinada Pisunichina, Torora Pisishna, Amanida Manina, Kirtania Sarahidi. Once you be more humble than a blade of grass, more tall than a tree, willing to give all respect to other people and expect no respect in return. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. And all of a sudden, we feel it's our place to instruct everybody on how to be humble, on how to be tolerant, making sure they're giving respect. You should respect me because Lord Chaitanya said that you should respect other people. And so, but is it always our place to give that instruction to another person? Just because somebody may need some instruction doesn't mean that's our place to always assume the role of guru, shiksha or diksha guru, assume the role of instruction giver, assume the role of policing other people in their spiritual life and telling them what to do. It's very, very tricky business. It's very, very, very tricky business. So Shobhari was giving some prohibition to Garuda, but apparently it wasn't his place. Let's see what comes up later. Text 17. Minansu dukitan drishtva dinan mina patauhate kripaya Shobhari praha tatratya kshemam acharan. Seeing how the unfortunate fish in that lake had become most unhappy at the death of their leader, Shobhari uttered the following curse under the impression that he was mercifully acting for the benefit of the lake's residents. Isn't that so interesting? He was under the impression that, like, I'm doing everybody a favor here. But apparently it was a false impression. That he thinks I need to step in and insert myself somehow when maybe nobody asked me to. In this regard, there's no mention here, at least from what I said, of the fish going to Shobhari Muni and saying, could you please do something? In this regard, Srila Vishwanath Thakur explains that when our so-called compassion does not tally with the order of the Supreme Lord, it merely causes a disturbance. That's a powerful line. In this regard, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that when our so-called compassion does not tally with the order of the Supreme Lord, it merely causes a disturbance. Because Shobhari Muni had forbidden Garuda's coming to that lake, Kaliya moved in and made his headquarters there, and this spell doomed for all the lake residents. So that was the consequence. When Shobhari Muni forbid Garuda to come around anymore, the serpent felt that they had free reign because Garuda also would eat serpents. And so sometimes a misplaced compassion, and it's so beautiful put here, as referenced by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, that our so-called passion does not tally with the order of the Supreme Lord. Is this, am I acting from my own, where am I receiving guidance from? It's a great question that devotees always need to be asking. Where am I receiving guidance from? Where am I receiving guidance from? And sometimes we need to check in with a mentor or a guide or a friend that we trust. And sometimes we need to just check in by, like, let me just go and I'm just going to go pray about that. Let me do some japa, like some real focused japa. Let me go read and study for a little bit and just spend some time with Krishna and meditate and allow Krishna to wash over me and make sure that I'm really coming from the right place. It doesn't mean that we don't it's another fine line, right? Because it's not that we just let anything happen, because that was what Arjuna initially wanted to do. He just wanted to run away, and Krishna's like, you have a duty to perform here. You need to step in. You need to intervene here. So there is a level in which we are meant to step in and do something and correct. There's something really, really powerful in the third chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. It's really powerful. Third chapter Bhagavad Gita. Krishna mentions, let's see, is it the third chapter or the sixth chapter? Yeah. Okay. I'm going to start in this is chapter 3, verse text 25. As the ignorant perform their duties with attachment to results, the learned may similarly act, but without attachment for the sake of leading people on the right path. So he's saying you can't judge people by their externals, that sometimes people are acting, but they're acting in a mood of great attachment. And some people are acting in the same way, but they're acting in a level of detachment. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur would ride around in a car, which at the time was, early 1900s, was quite luxurious and not befitting the normal activities of a sannyasi. Why did he do it? He did it because he was trying to associate with very high aristocratic leaders of the British government who would come to Calcutta. But there was detachment. He wasn't just like, yeah, I'm enjoying this ride. It was like there was he was an extreme ascetic. And so sometimes the activities are done externally, but there's renunciation internally. Text 25, 26. So as not to disrupt the minds of ignorant men attached to fruit of results of prescribed duties, a learned person should not induce them to stop work. Rather, by working in the spirit of devotion, he should engage them in all sorts of activities for the gradual development of Krishna consciousness. The spirit soul, bewildered by the influence of false ego, thinks themselves the doer of activities that are in actuality carried out by the three modes of material nature. One who is in knowledge of the absolute truth, O mighty armed Arjuna, does not engage in the senses and sense gratification, knowing well the differences between work and devotion and work for fruit of results. Bewildered by the modes of material nature, the ignorant fully engage themselves in material activities and become attached. But the wise should not unsettle them, although these duties are inferior due to the performer's lack of knowledge. So Krishna again and again is saying, like, don't feel that you need to go in and correct somebody else's life. Just do your duty, keep your side of the street clean, set the example, and take it from there. Therefore, Arjuna, O Arjuna, surrendering all your works unto me, with full knowledge unto me, without desires for profit, with no claims for proprietorship, and free from lethargy, fight. Isn't that interesting? Krishna is saying, several verses, he's saying, do not unsettle them. Do not disrupt the minds of ignorant people. But then he's saying, fight. Like, he's going to disrupt the minds of a lot of people. He's going to disrupt the lives of a lot of people. So he's saying, do intervene, do step in. But he's saying, do it surrendering to me with full knowledge of me, without desires for profit, with no claims to proprietorship, free from lethargy, those persons who execute their duties according to my injunctions. Isn't that right here what's said in the Bhagavatam by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur? When our so-called compassion does not tally with the order of the Supreme Lord? Those persons who do not act according to my injunctions, those who do execute their duties according to my injunctions and follow this teaching faithfully without envy, become free from the bondage or fruit of actions. But those who out of envy disregard these teachings and do not follow them regularly are considered to be bereft of all knowledge, befooled, and ruined in their endeavors for perfection. So for us as devotees trying to carry out Krishna's will in this life, it's really important that we take the biggest question for any devotee is, what's Krishna's will in this situation? What does Krishna want me to do? And the surrender of devotees that I'm willing to do anything, as hard as it may be. As hard as Arjuna was to step up and fight that battle. Somebody else, it may not have been their place to fight that battle. Krishna didn't tell Draupadi to get on the battlefield and go fight. After the battlefield, when Ashwatthama had killed her sons, she called for compassion. And the Bhagavatam lauds that compassion so beautifully. And so, time, place, circumstance, and individual. It's not that we all need to go out and start fighting, but it's that in that particular instance, for that particular time and place, for that particular person of Arjuna, that was Krishna's will. In another time and place, it might be something different. And so our sadhana, our hearing, our chanting, our service, our associating with devotees is simply the constant endeavor to understand Krishna's will in my life. Krishna's will in my life. How can I learn to separate the nudge of my ego and Krishna's? There's a beautiful book by Krishna Pastor. It's called The Power of a Whisper. Meaning that, like, learning to hear that soft voice of Krishna in the heart that sometimes just feels like a whisper. And so paying attention to that very deeply is important. Okay, we're going to read. We have 2 more verses here we're going to read. Jeff put a comment in the chat. Atra pravishya garudo yadi matsyan sakadati sadya pranar viyujeta satyam etar bravim yaham. If Garuda ever again enters this lake and eats the fish here, he will immediately lose his life. What I am saying is the truth. So this was what Isabel was saying, that if he entered the lake, he would die. The Acharyas explain, purport, in this regard, that because of Shobhari Muni's material attachment and affection for a fish, he failed to see the situation from the spiritual viewpoint. So that was exactly what's taking place in the 3rd chapter of the Gita. That's what we've been sharing here. The idea of really checking our motives and making sure that we're aligned with Krishna in some way. Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. The 9th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam describes his fall down for this offense. Okay, so this has already been described in the 9th canto. Because of his false pride, Shobhari Muni lost his power of austerity, and with it, his spiritual beauty and happiness. When Garuda came to the Yamuna, Shobhari Muni thought, although he may be a personal associate of the Supreme Lord, I will still curse him and even kill him if he disobeys my order. Such an offensive attitude against an exalted Vaishnava will certainly destroy one's auspicious position in life. As the 9th canto describes, Shobhari Muni married many beautiful women, Hare Krishna, and suffered greatly in their association. But because he had once become glorious by taking shelter of the Yamuna River in Vrindavan, he was ultimately delivered. Again, the story of every saint has a past, every sinner has a future. The stories of individuals and the ups and downs and turns and rounds of their life. Ultimately, we're all making our way back home, as bumpy as it may be. We're going to read the last verse real quick, just to get through it, and then we will pause. Tatkalya param veda nanya kaschana leliha avatsid garudad bita krishnena cha vivashita. Of all the serpents, only Kalya came to know of this affair, and in fear of Garuda, he took up residence in that Yamuna lake. Later, Krishna drove him out. So that's a little bit of the history of how Kalya came to be there. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and read Jeff's comment here. That was about 10 minutes ago. Is obstructing someone from attaining their object of desire an offense if their desire is self-destructive? One thing for a bird to eat a fish, but quite another for a person to consume something that could hurt them. No. Yes. So, again, at the end of the day, we're only instruments in Krishna's hand. Krishna Daya mentioned that one time we were planning a festival. What's the verse, Krishna Daya Prabhu, where Krishna mentions you can just be the instrument? I think it's 11th chapter, right? What's the verse? Savyasachi or something? Do we know it? I'm looking it up right now. Let me go ahead and share my screen for y'all. This will hopefully...
Nimitta matram bhava savyasachi. It comes like that.
Nimittam, yeah, let's see. What is the verse? What is the what verse is it? Gorsharan, is he there? Vasudeva, are they there? Let's see. There's a verse where Arjuna mentions, here it is.
11:55. 11:33.
11:33. 11:55 is a beautiful verse, devotional service, but 11:33. Thank you. Here it is. Tasmat tvam ut tista yashola basva jitasratrum bhungshva rajyam samridam mayaiva nihata Puravameva nimitta matram bhavasavya sachin. Therefore get up, prepare to fight and win glory, conquer enemies and enjoy a flourishing kingdom. They are already put to death by my arrangement, and you, O Savyasachi, can be but an instrument in the fight. So, Savyasachin refers to one who can shoot arrows very expertly. Thus, Arjuna is addressed as an expert warrior, capable of delivering arrows to cure his enemies. Just become an instrument. This word is also very significant. The whole world is moving according to the plan of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Foolish persons who do not have sufficient knowledge think that the nature is moving without a plan and all manifestations are but accidental formations. There are many so-called scientists who suggest that perhaps it was like this or maybe like that, but there is no question of perhaps or maybe. And Prabhupada goes on to mention that if one is in full Krishna consciousness, life is devoted to Lord's transcendent service, he is perfect. So the idea of, at the end of the day, to your question, Jeff, of I'm really acting on behalf of Krishna here. And I have to remind myself of that regularly. I'm acting on behalf of Krishna. And ultimately, any help I'm able to offer somebody is because Krishna is working through me. And sometimes Krishna has a bigger plan than what I can see in my tiny scope, Sometimes I can't control another person's actions. So I can try to help, but maybe my help isn't being accepted. Maybe it's not my particular place, it's somebody else's. Maybe now's not the right time. Maybe somebody needs to go through something before, in order to really come out the other side of it, a new person. And so we don't always know what's best for somebody else. I don't even always know what's best for me. But it's important for me to always, always, always pull back and remind myself, I'm just trying to act on behalf of Krishna. I'm just trying to be Krishna's instrument in any given situation. And how am I regularly checking in with Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra to to make sure I'm coming from that place. And so Krishna, it's like, Krishna, please guide me. Krishna, please help this person. I feel helpless, Krishna. I am helpless in this situation. This person needs help. Please use me in a way to help them. Please guide me to understand what it means to actually help them. I may not even know what helps them. I give this example also a lot, like my dog likes chocolate. I want to give them chocolate. Chocolate will kill my dog. you know, if there wasn't Google, I wouldn't know that, And so there was, Jim Carrey once said something really funny. He said, big shout out to all of our ancestors who died figuring out what plants we're not supposed to eat. Big shout out to all our ancestors who died figuring out what herbs are deadly, And so, we don't always know what's best for us, And so, well, we don't always know what's best for somebody else. We may have an idea, but it's important for us to regularly, continuously be checking in. And at the same time, don't be afraid to make mistakes. As long as we're willing to be corrected, as long as we're willing to be humbled. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. It's not the end of the world. I tried. You know what? I thought I was just trying to help. I realized that I wasn't. I do this a lot sometimes. I'm an executive director of Bucket Center. Half of my job is apologizing to people, and the other half is making all the mistakes that cause me to have to apologize to other people. And so it's like, at a certain point, sometimes I'm just like, you know what? I'm just going to stop talking and listen, because I'm clearly not making things better, or I clearly, I was trying to help. I say this often to people. I say this in my marriage. I say this to people I work with. I say this to devotees in the community. Clearly, I'm just trying to help, but clearly I'm not doing a very good job with it. So please help me understand how I can help you, or Krishna, help me understand how I can help them. And so, we just, the moral of the story, the main thread that I'm pulling out of this section is, Shobhari Muni thought he was trying to help, but our acharyas are explaining that actually he wasn't aligned with Krishna's desire, and he was acting independently, and he didn't take that time to check, and there was ego there. And we learn from the Gita itself and the places that I reference, and from Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, who's illuminating from us, is make sure that we're constantly pulling back to try to align ourselves as much as possible. And we're not always going to get it right, but if we're sincere, we'll get back on track, just like Shobhari Muni made his way back to Sri Vrindavan Dham and found grace. Okay, it's 8:01. Hare Krishna. Ananda Bihari's back on the screen. I don't know if Darshan is ready, if we're waiting for them or they're waiting for us. Thank you all so much for tolerating me. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Dayal, Gauranga, for a great class. I felt very connected. I felt hopeful. And I felt helpless also. And
Helpless and hopeful.
Yeah.
Those are two powerful dichotomies that devotees hold in their hearts. Vasudev is going to the altar. Thank you, Vasudev, for your tremendous, beautiful, amazing service. If anybody gets a chance, please reach out and thank Vasudev. He's watering the root of our tree. And the reason that we feel connected is because of his tireless, for over a decade, and all the other pujaris who are assisting him, the backup pujaris, all the devotees who donate and contribute to the service of Radha Mulidhar. They are the root of our tree, and we are the leaves filling that nourishment. So thank you, Vasudev, Gaur Sharan, Jindini Radhika, all the devotees who do service on the altar. Thank you. They are our hope. Our hope.
Yeah, the devotees are our hope.
They are our hope.
We don't know what we're doing.
I have no idea what I'm doing. Hare Krishna. Jai. Shri Radha Mulidhar ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Haribol.
Okay, cameras on, if you can, please, dear devotees.
Bhagavatam sam asitam purasundarangam andar kotikamaniya visheshatam adipurusham Mahavi Govinda Adipurusham Mahavi Govinda Adipurusham Mahavi Hayamiyanda Priyame Dimati Kasyan Pan Kayanti Kiram Jaganti Sadhu Bala Mahasya.
Okay, that was it. Thank you very much, dear devotees, for sticking around for the darshan. Amrita Kishori, what is this form you're manifesting?
How?
This is so funny.
Yeah, Krishna loves cow, I hear.
Nice. We love you, Amrita Kishori. This is so cute.
Thank you.
Okay.
We love you,
Yeah.
Benedict.
Would anyone like to comment or reflect? I had a reflection just quickly. Dayal Gauranga was speaking how we shouldn't be policing anybody. I was like, yes, we shouldn't be policing. And then he said, but we should engage, we should fight. But how do you fight and not police? And then finally he said, be an instrument. So I think this is a very nice balance that we can strike. We're not out there to police, but we're not there to be pushed around either. So we want to stay strong. So we want to be an instrument. Instrument is very strong. So you can do something with it. Something good for Krishna. So that's my reflection. Would anyone else like to reflect? Okay. So then we're going to wrap it up. Thank you very much for participating in this Sangha. This is the joy of our life, to be part of this little group. So thank you very much. Come again tomorrow. Be an instrument. It's fun. Krishna consciousness is fun. It's an adventure. Go for it. Engage with the world. Be in Krishna's instrument. What instrument would you like to be, Andrea? A hammer or what? A flute? What kind of a rake? A flute. Okay, flute. All right. Okay. All right. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.